care, lead, innovate, motivate, balance. These 5 tenets reveal ways of creating a more profitable and customer-centric pharmacy. What will you discover when you climb with RMS? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Climb. I'm Brad Jones, the founder and CEO of Retail Management Solutions, and it's a pleasure to have you with us this Saturday morning. So just before we came on, I checked the list of attendees, and I see a bunch of you that are return Climb veterans, and I also see a list of new people. So before we get into Climb, let me just talk about what Climb is for all you new attendees. So by now, you know Climb stands for care, lead, innovate, motivate, and balance. And that's kind of what we're all about here at RMS. Our mission statement for our customers is to make them the most profitable and customer-centric in the industry. So last year when we started Climb, we wanted to bring that same philosophy to all pharmacies across the nation. And that's the foundation of Climb. What you're going to see, if you keep coming back to Climb, and what you see today, is presentations by people talking about how to help you improve your bottom line, how to help you improve patient outcomes, to improve your business, to improve your outreach into your community. That's what Climb is about. We're not going to show you demonstrations of our products and services. We're bringing in professionals from across the land and pharmacists, your peers, to be in panels to show you how to help you improve your business. Now, at the end of Climb, we started doing a little session called After Climb, where I do a deep dive into one of our products or services or a piece of our product. And you're welcome to stick around for that, even if you're not a customer. But Climb is about helping you improve your business. Now, let me introduce my co-host today, Brandon Boleski. Brandon is the Director of Operations here at RMS. Next month, Brandon celebrates his 16th anniversary at the company. And you're looking at him probably going, wow, did he start like when he was 10? And not quite. But Brandon did start when he was in college as an intern. And over the last 16 years, he's worked his way up to be one of the top positions here at RMS. So welcome, Brandon. It's great to have you here at Climb with me.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I'm really excited to be hosting here with you. And welcome, everybody. Good morning. So last month's Climb, we covered clinical services. Pam Petrowski gave an excellent overview with a lot of insight into those services. We also had a fantastic panel discussion with insight from pharmacies directly who run their businesses on a clinical services model. If you missed it, you can check out the recordings on our website. As always, we definitely want your feedback. So at the end of today's webinar, we'll be emailing out a brief survey there. Please share your thoughts with us. And if you have questions at any time during today's webinar, feel free to use that little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So Brad, what's coming up today?
Okay, so in just a minute or so, I'm going to introduce Bob Lomenick. Many of you are going to recognize that name. He's one of the pioneers in medication synchronization. He's going to talk that topic. After that, Brandon and I'm going to come back and do a little Q&A with Bob. So as Brandon said, click on the Q&A button and put those questions in as you're listening to Bob. Then Brandon and I are going to come back and do the Climb Ascender Award. And at the time, Brandon will explain what that is for those of you who are new. And then after that, we're going to finish up with our last presenters, All and Scotty Sykes from Sykes & Company, who are going to talk to you about the things you need to know for tax season. And then I'm going to come in after Climb and do a deep dive into our product and how it handles inventory control. So without further ado, let me introduce Bob Lomenick. So Bob is a pharmacist, a longtime pharmacy owner, and as I said, is one of the pioneers of medication synchronization as we know it today. So Bob's going to share how MedSync impacted his business and his patients. He's going to then talk a little bit about what has happened since COVID. And I think this is just a perfect start to what we're going to be doing in April. We're going to actually do a real deep dive into how to create and run a MedSync program. So I'm really excited. And without further ado, please welcome Bob Lomenick.
Okay, folks, thank you very much. And thank you for that introduction, Brad. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks to the RMS team and everything they do for the advancement of pharmacy and adapting to change like they have to keep us in the state of the art, if you will. I appreciate everything you do with Retail Management Solutions. So as Brad said, we're going to talk about medication synchronization. I cannot imagine this day and time practicing in a pharmacy that does not have some type of synchronization program. I've been doing it about 12 years. Again, I can't imagine going into a pharmacy that does not have. I do a lot of presentations. I'm surprised at the number of pharmacies that do not have a synchronization program. I can assure you that it will change your business, and quite frankly, it can change your life, as you'll hear in just a little bit. So I've got a lot to cover in a short period of time. I am from Mississippi. I generally talk slow. I'm going to talk fast. It may not seem like it's fast for you guys, but it does to me. So hopefully we can get all the content covered, and we'll just jump right in. This is my practice sites. I have 4 pharmacies. I won't get into all of them. Tyson Drug Company, we're in Mississippi. I'm in North Mississippi, a community called Holly Springs. If you want to search for Tyson Drug Company in Holly Springs, Mississippi, there's links to all my other sites. You can see some of the things we do if you're interested in doing that. But let's just jump right in. Practice of pharmacy is rapidly migrating from to a value-based healthcare system. And actually we're migrating into that value-based healthcare system. Most of the other healthcare entities, HMOs, ACOs, insurance plans, they're all migrated. They've all gotten to be a value-based healthcare system. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. I put the slide up there on the left. It's dated, and it's dated for a reason. That thing's probably several decades old, but quite honestly, there's a lot of pharmacies, a lot of community pharmacies practicing just like they did decades ago. Filling as many prescriptions as quickly as you can, getting patients out the door, and really not providing any health care. So years ago, a decade or so ago, when reimbursements, dispensing fees were decent, and you could actually make money on the product, that kind of practice was comfortable. But was it a care model? No. Filling as many prescriptions as quickly as you can and getting patients out the door is not a care model. So because we're migrating into that value-based healthcare system, those reimbursements, I don't have to tell you, have gone down. DIR fees have entered the picture. So you cannot continue to stay in business if you're just strictly looking for higher reimbursement fees. If you're focusing strictly on chasing reimbursement fees, then I think it's a race to the bottom, and I don't know how long you'll be in business. So you've got to learn how to change, if you will, and migrate from that reactive. And by the way, this picture on the left, that's a reactive business model. It's a completely broken business model. We're reacting to patients. Quite frankly, patients have been training us for decades. We want to adapt to every patient that walks in to what they need or what they think they need. So we need to change that broken reactive business model into a proactive business model to where we're training our patients now, and that can be done. We want to get over into the picture on the right where the pharmacist is actually out talking to the patient, has time to talk to the patient, finding their pain points and figuring out the solutions to their pain points. So We've got to get away from that reactive, broken, chaotic business model and get it organized. When I'm talking about your maintenance medication, that's 70% on average, that's 70% of your business. If you get those maintenance prescriptions under control, then 3/4 of your day is done. So it's real and it can be done. So I was one of those pharmacy owners where, decades ago, they're start talking about MTMs, Marixa outcomes, looking at your equip numbers, getting patients enrolled in a diabetic education program. All of these things they wanted us to do. And what was my reply? I don't have time to do all that crap. Looking back on it, what I was saying was, I don't have time to efficiently run my business, or I don't have time to take care of my patients. So I have a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, he said this several years ago, everybody wants progress, but nobody wants change. And you cannot have one without the other. About 10 or 12 years ago, I closed my pharmacy and I went home. My family, my wife and children were not there. They were probably gone to a ball game that I didn't go to because I was married to my pharmacy. I just sit down on the sofa. I didn't turn the television on. I just sit there and I was mentally exhausted. And I thought to myself, this is not how my profession, that's not how I intended it to be. That's not how my career I wanted it to be. I said, I got 3 choices. I could continue to complain about it, and everybody around me was sick of that. I could just accept it, try to smile and say, this is the way it's going to be. Or I could change. If I wanted to progress, how was I going to change? I needed to change, but what was I going to change? But if I wanted to progress, I had to change. What was I going to change? I reflected on my day that day. Who came in? I love my patients, don't get me wrong. Some of those patients that were in today were in a couple of days ago, last week. I don't have to paint a picture for you guys. These people taking multiple medications are in multiple times a month. And we love them. We know them all. They want to chat with you. When they bring that one bottle in today, they want a little chat with you. Last week, they wanted to chat with you. You got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients that want to chat with you several times a month. Well, that's what causes a lot of the chaos, confusion, and all. You're trying to do so much, you just can't do it. So I thought, why can't I organize that? Those people taking multiple medications, why can't I come up with a system where they get them one time a month, come into the store or deliver one time a month? And then why can't I come up with a system to where I contact them several days in advance, have a staff member talk to them about their medication, to resolve all of those fires that pop up when they walk into the store. Something's wrong with the insurance. They don't have a refill on the prescription. All the things that happen, I don't have to tell you, that can be done in a controlled environment, if you will, away from the pharmacy, so we don't have to deal with it in the trenches. What I was talking about was medication synchronization. I didn't call it that at the time. Taking a large group of a completely chaotic, reactive business model and organizing it. Okay, so the next day, I'm excited. I wake up, I go into my pharmacy and tell my staff what we're going to do. And they say, that sounds great, Bob, how we're going to do it. And I said, I don't have a clue how we're going to do it. So we just started communicating, talking. I chose my pick to be kind of my sync champion. And we talked about what this thing might look like. And we just dug in. And I didn't have all the tools that you have available today. Most dispensing fees have some type of synchronization program built in. I didn't have any of that. I just was out on my own, and I just did whatever I thought I had to do. And we just kind of kept fighting and fighting and fighting. And I'll be honest, there were so many times during this process, I wanted to throw in the towel and say, this is not worth it. Every time I thought like that, and this is great advice for you guys because it's going to happen. Every time I would get frustrated, I would think, Bob, you may not be going the right direction, but you're not going to go back where you were on that sofa that night because I was miserable. So I kept plugging. I kept adding more patients. So it finally, and how did we start? Again, I didn't have the roadmaps you guys have today. I got Susie and put her in the back room with a desk and a telephone and a label printer. And the first person that walked in with a sack full of bottles, I said, John, how would you like for all these prescriptions to run out at the same time every month? He said, I would love that, Bob. And I went back and put them on Susie's desk. And I said, let's figure this out. Again, you have the tools to do it. So let's talk about what you need to do. You got to get your team motivated. Again, I told you that you need to choose a sync champion. You can't do it all. One thing I learned to do in my career was learn how to delegate. I was one of those that thought I had to come to the pharmacy an hour before it opened, fill up the drink machine, put vials in the bins, put sacks under the cash, had to do everything. And I know a lot of you feel that way now, but I learned to delegate, and when I started delegating to other people to do these things, they got it done a lot better than I was doing it. So I chose my pick to be my sync champion. And so I laid a notebook by his station and I said, today, right, I want you to jot down a little note of everything you did or do today. Just make a little quick note. And so he did throughout the day. And this is an example of what happened. All these things that he did, some of them I mentioned earlier that I was doing, a lot of things he did, there was only 4 of them that a pharmacist had to do. So I asked him to start learning how to delegate and prioritize his time. And so we had regular meetings, and I strongly encourage, once you choose your leader and your leadership team, you have regular meetings with them. So important to have regular meetings with them. We have daily huddles every morning in the pharmacy. My staff does. And they talk about the good things that happened the day before. They talk about the not so good things that happened the day before and what maybe they could put in place to prevent those not so good things from happening. So you have regular meetings and you delegate. Me as a store owner, the lead, the sync champion, they can't do everything, but they can see that everything gets done. And how do you do that? You have regular meetings and do some other things we'll talk about. I don't care whether it's a high volume pharmacy or a lemonade stand. If you add some structure, if you organize it, it's going to be more efficient and it's going to be more profitable. Years ago, I went to a webinar, and not a webinar, we're doing so many webinars lately, we think everything's a webinar. I went to a conference, believe it or not, we used to have live conferences. Went to a conference and there was a guy named Tom Feltenstein there. He was a marketing guru. The reason I have the McDonald's box there, he created the Happy Meal, and I think he had a pretty good idea there. But he made a statement during his presentation that one of the reasons that small businesses fail or maybe don't succeed like they want to is they do not train their staff well enough. They do not spend enough time training their staff. How does that relate to pharmacy? I grew up in an environment, and I'm sure a lot of you have this same scenario now, to where we had our A-team tech. Boy, that tech is great. That tech knows everything we want done on a daily basis. They get it done. They've been with you a long time. They know your moves. We know their moves. Then you got the B-team techs that aren't so efficient. Why are they not so efficient? You haven't spent the time training them. So you're scared to death you're going to lose that A-team tech. If they're sick, your day is chaotic because people aren't as efficient. So in my practice, what I've done in each station, they know what they're supposed to do, and every 4 hours they rotate. And so they learn everyone else's position. So if one of my techs is absent, sick one day, then there's somebody there that can step into their role. I no longer have A teams or B teams. I have all A teams, and it makes a huge difference in the flow of your pharmacy. And that's so important, is you've got to sit down and take a look at how your pharmacy is flowing now and what you want it to look like. Write it down on a whiteboard, or get your team together on a table with butcher paper and write down everything and how you imagine it's going to look, and it's going to change, but just get it in the back of your mind what you want it to look like. So workflow obviously is going to change when you start developing a synchronization model. I mentioned earlier the technology that's available now that I didn't have back when we started. Most all dispensing systems have some type of synchronization program in place. Monday morning, you need to take a look at yours. If you're wanting to start a synchronization program, get with your sync champion, your lead people, and review and see what your technology vendor can bring to the table as far as synchronization. If yours does not have a synchronization model, there's third-party vendors out there that can interface with your dispensing feed, pull those patients out that you want synchronized, and do the juggling. One of the most important things is you want to develop policies and procedures, written policies and procedures. As you go thinking about what's got to happen at each workstation, write down, and it doesn't have to be anything, some fancy binder, on a piece of notebook paper, write down the procedures that have to happen at each one of those stations. It's like a basketball team. Basketball teams practice. They have a book of plays. That's their policies and procedures. When they practice these plays, each team member has their job to do. If they do not do their job, then they're not going to score a basket. Can you imagine a basketball team having two plays? One offensive play, go score a basket. The other play is a defensive play, just keep the other people from scoring. I've actually followed some teams and I think that was their policy. So how does that relate to pharmacy? You have each station knowing what they're doing. Can you imagine your policy in your pharmacy being, okay, here's our policy on filling prescriptions. If somebody walks in with a prescription, let's fill it. Can you imagine the chaos? And I know none of you are down to that level, but some of you do not have policies and procedures written down at each place because each team member has to do their place or it doesn't flow properly. You're going to continually improve upon that as you get into it and you see things happen that you want to change. Continuous quality improvement. Well, that sounds important. It's really saying what's working and what's not working. And let's write down what's working and figure out what's not working and see if we can make some changes and write it down and make it work. Encourage your team, your entire team. Work with your sync champion to make certain the whole team gets involved. If you've got a tech that's in the back of her mind thinking, you know, if we did it this way, it may work better. Encourage your team to bring those ideas out. You know, as a store owner, I don't have all the answers. And that's how my team has really gotten involved as I encourage them to bring ideas to the table and we use some of those ideas. I'm not afraid to use new ideas. They may work, they may not work. If they don't work, I don't get upset. Let's move on. But once you use some ideas that a team member has brought to the table, it's contagious. So please encourage your team to bring ideas. In this short time, I cannot give you a step-by-step method of exactly how to do synchronization. What I can do is give you 5 key points to where you can take back to your pharmacy and figure out how you want to do it, how I want to do it. And it's based on several things. How I want to do it's going to differ from you based on what technology you have, how you want your workflow, your store layout. So I'm going to give you the 5 basic features that you need to endorse and work on, and then it's up to you to go back. So you start with which patients you want to start synchronizing with first. Remember the example I gave you earlier is that patient walked in with a sack full of bottles and we started with him. That's totally the wrong way to start. So, but I didn't know, I didn't have a roadmap. So I didn't have webinars to go to. I didn't have people writing stories about how to synchronize. So how do you recruit? What kind of patients are you looking for? I strongly suggest starting with oral contraceptives. Those young women on birth control pills, that's an easy one to get synced up. They're going to get those each and every month. They want to get those each and every month. And when you explain to them, however you choose to do it, that you're going to call them a week or so before they're due, tell them when it's ready to be picked up or delivered, and then do it. It's the return on that is amazing. I absolutely love it. Plus you learn how to get medication in synchronization. Also, you may want to consider getting a relative or a friend that takes 2 to 3 maintenance medications. So if you boo-boo on them, they don't get mad, they're not going to leave you. I would strongly suggest setting goals, setting small goals. The worst thing you can do is say, I'm going to start out by getting 60 new patients on sync. Start out with 10 the first week. And if you're comfortable, maybe bump that up. I'd go with 10 for the first 2 weeks. Get your staff comfortable. Let everybody understand what's going on. So the second point there is how do you get them enrolled? Once you identify which patients you want, how do you enroll them? You want to run reports of all your patients on oral contraceptives, or those friends or relatives on 2 or 3 maintenance medications? Do you want to call them in advance and tell them you're going to set them up in the synchronization model? Or do you want to wait till they come in the store and create a script and you'll identify those patients? The birth control pills will be obvious, but those other patients, you'll need to think about how you want to identify that they're in the sync program. Okay. So it's up to you. Do you want to call them in advance? Do you want to wait till they come in and have your staff give them the presentation or the script you have them, say, hey, Ms. Jones, you've been identified as someone would benefit for this, and tell the patients the benefit, how it's going to benefit them, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The middle feature here, the short filling, that can be the most confusing on the beginning, but once you do it, and once you get more and more patients, like my staff now, they can get a patient enrolled in sync. It's like tying their shoes. They just know how to do it because they've done it so much. So short filling, what I mean by short filling, as you get more patients that are on multiple medications, you're going to they never run out at the same time. We've already established that. That's what causes all the chaos. You want them to run out at the same time. So you got to identify what we call an anchor drug. It could be an HIV drug that costs you $5,000 for a bottle of 30. You don't want to break that bottle, but you want to sync everything. You want to short fill everything else to that, meaning you take a look at their profile, and if they're needing their lisinopril, for example, it ran out today, and you normally give them a 30-day supply, but you look at your anchor med, and it's coming due in 15, then you want to give them 15 of your lisinopril medications, and look at their other medications. You may give them 10 of something else so that they all run out when that anchor med comes due. And obviously you explain to these patients when they get a bottle that's only got 10 meds in it, why you're doing what you're doing. So it takes a little effort on the front end, but believe me, it pays off. Now you're going to get into insulins, eye drops, PRN meds are never going to run out with those maintenance medications that have to be received every month, have to be taken every month. You'll start learning how to juggle this. This is something your staff will learn how to do as you get into it. For example, if a patient takes 10 meds, one of them is a insulin, and you give them 9 meds because their insulin's not due for a week, the worst thing you can do is ask that patient to come back in a week, or you have to deliver again in a week. So your staff will learn who these patients are. In that example, you want to go ahead and give them the insulin, and if you can adjudicate it, fine. If you can't, then you future adjudicate it. You look and see what their previous copay was. They're regular patients, that come in your store. You know them. So if the copays come up differently, you can explain to them. Normally, they're going to be the same. So these are the things that you learn. Your staff will learn how to juggle those things you discuss on a daily basis of how could we have resolved this. Your sync caller, you're going to have to take one of your key techs that understands everything about your business, and they're going to start calling patients. Now, I mentioned earlier that my staff rotates. You do not want your sync caller to rotate. You want your patients talking to the same person every month as much as possible. So you identify that person that's going to call them, the one with the best personality that could really talk to these patients, understands their medications to the top of their ability. Two or three things that's extremely important with that sync caller. The first thing is you get that sync calling station out of the hustle and bustle of your pharmacy. I made that mistake. I had them in a back room right behind my pharmacy. My pharmacy staff was constantly calling them out to help them get caught up. Counterproductive. Get that patient in a private office to where the staff cannot get to them and interrupt them. Now, in the beginning, that sync caller is probably going to be calling these patients, then coming out and filling herself because there's not going to be that much patient load. As you grow, and you will, then that sync caller, her responsibilities are much bigger, and she's going to have to just solely do sync calling. Also very important to impress from the beginning that sync caller, after they talk to the patient about their 10 medications, and you'll have a script that you'll create of what you want that sync caller to say to each of those patients. And you'll need to sit down and go over that. Your leadership team, y'all need to discuss on what has to happen on that call. One thing that absolutely has to happen on that call is you want that, by the way, the sync caller, after they call the patient and everything's good to go, they're going to adjudicate the claim right then. So, and you want them to do that because they're in a controlled environment, not interrupted. They can pick up on any problems that may happen. You want that synchronization person to create what I call a clean claim, meaning they have chosen the right NDC, the one you have in stock, no insurance problems. Do they search for a discount card if it's a high copay? Or all the things that we all try to do out on the bench, in the trenches, while the phones are ringing, everybody's trying to talk to you and you're trying to figure out why she doesn't have a refill or look for a refill. Your sync caller can do all of that behind the scenes. You don't even know it's going on. She's cleaning up all your prescription refills behind the scenes. Extremely important that you train that person to do it properly, because eventually these calls, these prescriptions are going to go out into a dispensing area. You may want to have your sync dispensing areas separately. It's up to you. You may want to have it mixed in with your regular prescriptions that are waiting, but you have to figure out a way of differentiating those prescriptions, because you can work on these sync prescriptions in the downtime, but you got to take care of those people who are waiting. We just talked about the processing and filling. So once it's adjudicated, where does it need to go? What needs to happen? Is it a delivery? Does it need to go in regular will call? So you're calling the patients, and I would suggest setting up, calling a week in advance. You're on that call, the sync caller is going to let them know when those medications are going to be ready, and I would develop some type of system to let the patient know when they're ready for pickup. Originally, we used to have our will call set up on the day we're supposed to pick them up, the day their old meds were to be run out. I mean, we were really focusing on adherence. We've since changed that a little bit. So when we put them in will call, they're ready to be picked up. If the patient wants to pick them up a day or two early, they can, and we identify, or we let them know that they're ready for pickup. Real quickly, 5 things. How do you recruit patients? How do you enroll patients? How do you short fill them? What happens on that synchronization call? And then how do we process them after they've been called? You're taking that unorganized, chaotic, reactive business model, and you're creating a proactive way of doing it. I've covered this really quickly, but once you focus on these five processes and incorporate it into your technology, into the way you want your workflow to work, you'll start seeing the benefits. Obviously, your staff roles are going to change. They're going to be in different positions. Remember, each workflow station has to know what their role is. I've got this example. I had a staff member that was quarantined COVID last year. She actually carried her laptop that had our dispensing system on it, and she worked from home. You can see her exercise bike in the past. She was calling patients and she was adjudicating prescriptions. So you can adjust to change, which is what this is all about. What Brad and his team do so well is figure out what's changing and adapt to it. So obviously last year there was a lot of changes that we had to adapt to with COVID. We all had to maybe close our doors for a while. How did we adjust our workflow then? What's interesting is when we did close our door for a couple of months, it really did not change my dispensing habits. Now, there were obviously a lot of acute prescriptions that we didn't get. People weren't going to the doctor's offices, and you know, there was not much acute stuff, not much cough and cold. But my maintenance medications never missed a lick. My patients knew they were going to get their medication. They changed our sync call because of COVID. They weren't coming in the store. We had to tell them our process, and they adapted very well. We were talking to them anyway. So we just told them, hey, their doors are closed. This is what you have to do. So when you have your business organized, when things like COVID hit, it's easy to adapt to that change. Where that unorganized reactive business model, what were those people going to do? Can you imagine them calling you and coming up to a curb service 4 or 5 times a month? I don't know how people adjusted to that. So you got to rethink your staff role as roles as things change. So benefits. What about the benefits for your patient? We just talked about it. Convenience. They're coming to the pharmacy 1 time a month, or you're delivering 1 time a month instead of multiple times a month. A lot of you who had to have deliveries, how many of your patients do you deliver to more than 1 time a month, or more than 1 time a week, or more than 1 time a day? You know, that's a great candidate for starting your sync program. Obviously, you're optimizing their health goals, which is, again, as I started out, that's where we're going, value-based. We want to create healthy outcomes for our patients. When you get them enrolled in a synchronization program, they're taking their medications like they're supposed to. They're healthier, which translates into less trips to the emergency room, to the doctor, to the hospital, which translates into huge savings for the payer. So we now have payers that are identifying high-performing pharmacies and paying us for stuff as simple as synchronization. Obviously, the pharmacist now has more time to actually talk to the patient, find their pain points, and visit with them. What you're interested in more, obviously we're all interested in benefits for the patients, but what's it going to do for my pharmacy? The fire extinguisher there, a lot of the fires that have been popping up out in your dispensing area. Remember I talked about what the sync collar can do to prevent all these fires from popping up? Your sync collar is taking care of a lot of that stuff in the back room. Better communication, you're more organized, okay? Back to the lemonade stand. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's a high volume pharmacy or lemonade stand. If it's more organized, it's more efficient and more profitable. Your inventory goes down. Your cash flow increases. How does that happen? When you really get a robust synchronization program, those 10 prescriptions you're calling on that patient, you may not even have them in stock today. Once you talk to that patient, you create a process to where you order those medications. They come in and you fill the prescriptions, put them in will call or delivery, whatever. They don't stay on your shelf. That money's not sitting on your shelf. It's moving. Staffing. You can control your staff. You have a better feel of when you're going to be busy. I used to lose sleep at night the first 3 nights of the month because what was going to happen the next day. Currently, the first 3 days of the month, the busiest part of my pharmacy is the cashier. All those prescriptions for those first of the month patients, maintenance prescriptions, I've got them ready and in will call. So that workload in the pharmacy, the dispensing area, is greatly decreased the first of the month. Increased prescription fills. In a traditional pharmacy that does not do synchronization, you fill a prescription, a maintenance prescription, 7 to 8 times a year. When you have them in a synchronization program, you fill them 12 or sometimes 13 times a year if you're doing a 28-day cycle. So you get incremental refills. Studies have shown that for every 100 patients you enroll in a synchronization model, you have a $90,000 increase in revenue. I'll repeat that. For every 100 patients that you enroll in a synchronization program, it's estimated a 90% increase in revenue. I have pharmacy owners when I do this presentation, and I've trained hundreds of pharmacy owners and staff across the nation on synchronization. I have a lot of them say, I'm not doing any of this till I get paid for it. Folks, you're getting paid for it. It's a side effect. Equip scores. So with having a robust synchronization program, I have time to work on my business instead of just in my business. So we have time to focus on our equip numbers and take a look at those problem patients. Our equip numbers are by side effect going to get better because you're putting in a synchronization program which improves adherence, and obviously you know that that's part of the equip numbers. It allows you time then to that you can make them take their medication line. Again, equip scores being better lowers your DIR fees. We all know how terrible DIR fees. Talking to my accountant not long ago, what I'm understanding, pharmacies average somewhere 5% or more. 5% of revenue are their DIR fees. So mine run less than 2.5%. Okay. So what does that mean? Let's take it for an example, a $5 million pharmacy. 5% of their revenue, 5% of that $5 million are DIR fees. That's $250,000. Mine run less than 2.5%, but let's use 2.5% for ease of figuring. 2.5% of that $5 million pharmacy is $125,000. You have just saved $125,000 on your DIR fees for having a robust synchronization program. That's a side effect, okay? So you are getting paid for this. Y'all mentioned clinical services a little while ago. Again, because it's allowed me to work on my business instead of in my business, we've developed a clinical services program within my pharmacies. I've hired a clinical pharmacist to run the clinical program in my pharmacy. He not only, his goal, he had to pay his salary and make a profit. And within a year and a half, he is doing that. And I'm really close to looking at hiring another clinical pharmacist because there's so many revenue streams on the clinical services. Again, I mentioned you get payers are now looking for high-performing pharmacies. Pharmacies that have migrated into that value-based system, just like we're talking about, and they're offering to pay us to do some of these things. They see the benefits for their patients. So where I'm going with this is synchronization is the secret sauce. I train, as I said, hundreds of pharmacies every year to do synchronization. And nothing makes me feel better than 6 or 8 months after they've been here. I run into them. They say, Bob, this is great. Using your advice, we got 1,000 patients in our sync model. And right now, guys, I currently have 3,000 patients, but I'm not going to poke my chest out about bragging about I've got 3,000 patients. It's what I do with those patients that I'm proud of. So when those pharmacy owners say, man, I got 1,000 patients in my sync program, I look at them and say, well, what are you doing with them? And they say, what do you mean, what am I doing with them? I said, it's what you do with sync that's important. Sync is the secret sauce that allows you to do all this stuff. Are they in a diabetes management program? Are you doing immunizations? You know, what it opens so many doors, clinical services. So again, it's the secret sauce to improving your business, increasing revenue, increasing your profit. Let me jump to the next slide here. This is my family. I have 2 older sons, one on the left holding a grandchild and one to the left of me. That's me holding the other grandbaby on the right. The one in the hat's my other son. Both of my sons are attorneys. I'm proud of them in spite of being attorneys, but neither one of my older sons early in high school, they said they're not going to be a pharmacist because, Dad, we see what it's done to you. Well, folks, that hurt. So fast forward, the one on the left there, my oldest son holding my grandbaby there, he graduated in December, about a year and a half after I started controlling my business instead of it controlling me. That was about a year and a half after I started this process. He graduated in December in computer science from Ole Miss. So he came up and got me. We went Christmas shopping. And so his name is John Travis. I call him JT. And so we stopped and had lunch. And I said, well, JT, you graduated in computer science. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? He looked at me, and I'll never forget this, folks. He said, Dad, I'm thinking about going back to pharmacy school. I was stunned. I said, JT, what's happened to you? And he looked at me straight in the eyes and he says, now, Dad, what's happened to you? You are fun again. He said, when we call the pharmacy, you can actually talk to me. You actually come down to Oxford and carry us out to eat and we have fun. When we're at your house on the weekends and you come home from work, we don't run to the other end of the house to get away from you because you're so irritable. Folks, I knew what the synchronization model had done for my patients. I knew what it had done for my business. That night, sitting on the sofa, my thought process was selfish. I wanted to make my life easier, and it certainly did that. I knew what it had done for my patients. I knew what it had done for my business. That moment, that conversation with my son, JT, I realized what it had done for me. That night on the sofa, I was miserable. I enjoy my family now. I'm happy at home now. My family enjoys being around me. We go on vacations together, all of us. We go to dinner together, all of us. And they love me again. I'm not saying they didn't love me, but they enjoy being around me again. So the guy with the golf club there, I love playing golf. There was a period of time, 5-year period, where my prescription volume increased 65%. So because of synchronization, and I was doing it much easier. During that same period of time, my golf handicap went down. For those of you who don't play golf, that means I was playing better golf. Was I playing better golf because I was playing more golf? Or was I playing better golf because my stress level was down? I can 100% say that it's because my stress level was down. The shaking hands there, because of synchronization and the fact that I'm working on my business instead of in my business, I have created so many more relationships that I never thought I would have, not only within the medical community, just within the general community as a whole, going to meetings, church meetings, Rotary clubs, and explaining what we do for our patients. Businesses around town are now encouraging their employees to come to Tyson's because they get better care there and they're healthier, which keeps them at work. So back to that night on the sofa, I was absolutely miserable. Those three choices I had, I chose change, and I stuck with it. And so it's made me a different person. Again, I knew what it did for my business. I knew what it did for my patients, but it's what it can do for you that was the most important. So I hope I didn't go over time too much. I'm happy to answer questions. I covered a lot of material in a short period of time. I really wanted to get more into why it's important that you do synchronization, not exactly how. You guys have got to get in there and figure out. Going forward, I'll help you any way I can, and I'll certainly answer any questions that we have time for today.
Batch multiple prescriptions into a single bag in Will Call. Then scan one barcode at checkout. No forgotten prescriptions, no wasted time, and best of all, Will Call by RMS is crazy easy. Okay, welcome back, Bob. Wow. I just want to tell you, thank you for the stories. I touching, and quite frankly, my favorite presentation that I've seen since we've been doing Climb. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing with us everything you just shared.
Well, you know, what's interesting about the way I did this presentation about more the why is exactly how to. You know, pharmacists are going to have to figure that out mostly on their own, and they will. You know, it's not a hard process. If I can do it, anybody can do it. But the why is what's important, what it can do for your business. I think we're all, you know, so many of us get trapped in a rut. And one of my favorite, you know, we get in a rut. We keep doing the same thing over and over to expect different results. And what I like to say is the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. You know, eventually it's going to kill us if we don't get out of that rut. So
no, absolutely. You know, and it really resonated with me because my dad just sold his independent pharmacy that was been in our family since 55. And fortunately sold it to a young couple. It's remaining an independent pharmacy. But, you know, when you talked about your sons not going to pharmacy school, my brother and I did not go to pharmacy school. So I have one brother and same situation. He said, my dad told us not to go to pharmacy school. He said, you know, I just don't like the way this is going. Just, you don't want to do this. And you know, he changed though as time went on. And I think he regretted that in the end. But I founded RMS 22 years ago, and I've been around pharmacy my whole life. But I'll tell you what, for all of those of you listening, all you pharmacies, I mean, I hear you with the IR fees and bad reimbursement rates and so forth, but business is hard. I mean, I've seen a massive change in the technology world in the last 22 years. And if we don't change, we fail. And we stop. I abdicated some responsibility instead of delegating it quite a few years ago. And there's a period in RMS's history where we failed. We were not doing what we needed to be doing. And it cost us. It cost us a lot of independent businesses that left us because they didn't feel we were doing the things they needed. And, you know, and we had to adjust and change, and you have to do that if you want to survive. So I think, to me, I mean, I absolutely need to be doing MedSync, and I love that you talk about that. But I think, to me, the most important part of what you talked about today was change, you know, and adapting to the environment. And thank you so much for that. And pharmacies need to do it. So we of course, we're running long, but that's okay because that was so important. There are a couple of questions. I am just going to take one though. So if you briefly, one of the questions was, what are some of the common pain points that you experience with MedSync programs? So if you could do that in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll do it really quickly. One of the most important thing, and I touched on it just a tad, but when I train pharmacy owners, when they come in here to learn how to do sync, when they get back to the pharmacy, and it took me a several people calling and asking me about this. After they get, to the 50 to 100 patient range, it begins to get very difficult. And I mentioned that how I struggled on the beginning and looking back, and it's because you're taking a group of patients, a small group, and you're trying to move that needle over here. Well, you start the needle moving and you've got a small group of your patients that you're doing something different for. That's the pain point. It's hard because the rest of your patients, you're doing it the same old wrong way, if you will. So you got a group of patients you're doing it differently for. You have to work through that. So once you get that needle flipping to the other side and the majority of your patients are in a sync model, then it becomes your normal way of doing business and it's easier. So please, when you get to that 50 and 100 patient range, I've actually had pharmacists call and say, Bob, you said this was going to be easier. It's a lot harder. Well, I had to figure out why they were telling me that. It's because that pain point is when they get to that 50 to 100 patient range, and you got to work through that, get over that hill. I mean, you're climbing up that hill trying to make things better. You don't want to go back to that sofa that I was at. So keep going and keep going. And I could have easily done that, but I didn't. So once you get to that, again, we got 3,000 patients and it flowed. We contact each and every one of them every month. So that's the pain point. The other real quick one I'll mention is buy-in from your team. And when I first came in that day and told them what we're going to do, and we started doing it, I think for a while my team thought I was crazy. Hell, there was times I thought I was crazy. So, but anyway, you have to keep encouraging your team and say, no, we're not trying to replace anyone. We're trying to make your job easier. And when you're in your pharmacy 3 or 4 months after you start synchronization, and you hear that key tech say, why isn't Miss Smith in the synchronization program? You're there. Your team has bought in. They get it because they see then how much easier their life is, how much easier their day is, and they're not mentally exhausted at the end of the day like they once were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, buy-in is so important, and we see the same thing here. When we make a change, and you're absolutely right. Nobody likes the word change.
Right.
But we do want to progress, right?
But everybody wants progress. That's right.
Listen, thank you so much. I would love to have you back. I hope you'll come back at some point down the road here and join us again. We really do appreciate your time. So have a terrific rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you and your team for what you do, Brad.
Thanks, Bob. How do you become a more profitable pharmacy? The RMS Boost training program uses your data, merchandising tips, and best practices to help you achieve your profitability goals. Experience RMS Boost.
Well, welcome back. Now it's time for us to present the RMS Climate Center Award. Climate centers are pharmacies or individuals that go above and beyond for their teams, patients, and communities. Last month's Climate Center was Ocean Sunset Drug, who has done just that. Every Climate Center receives an award from RMS, along with a $250 donation made in their name to the local educational program of their choice. If you would like to nominate our next RMS Climate Center, please feel free to visit our website and follow the links. So Brad, would you like to announce this month's Climate Center?
Absolutely. So it's really my privilege and pleasure to congratulate Barry Bryant and his team at Barney's Pharmacy in Augusta, Georgia, as the February Climate Center Award winner. Been a longtime customer of ours, and we've always been really impressed with the scope of their commitment, their services, how they handle their patients, and how they outreach to their communities. So we're happy to award them with a crystal plaque with their name on it, and then as Brandon mentioned, we donate $250, and they've chosen that to go to the Boys and Girls Club in their local community. So it's my pleasure again. Congratulations, Barry and his team at Bryant Pharmacy, and we're going to run a real quick video of their organization. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce our last presenter today. Scotty Sykes is from Sykes and Company. Sykes and Company specializes in accounting, tax, and financial advisory services for independent pharmacies. Today, Scotty is going to talk about the things you need to know coming into this tax season. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Scotty Sykes.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here today with the RMS team. Today, I'm going to talk about what pharmacies need to know about pandemic relief and legislation. But I got to say, I just heard the end of Bob's talk there, and you know, he's a legend, and what he's saying is spot on. I actually was going to touch on some of that here today, you know, what we're seeing in the industry is constantly evolving. With that constant change and evolution, we're seeing this opportunity. You know, we work with hundreds of pharmacies here at Sykes and Company all over the country. And I can tell you that the pharmacies that are doing what Bob preaches, you can see that in their numbers. It works. These pharmacies are leading the change. It's adding to their bottom line, among all the other benefits that come with that. So, you know, I hate to follow up with Bob. That's a tough task, but I'll do my best here. And we're going to talk about mainly, you know, as we get into tax season, what we're facing here today. Obviously, everything I'm talking about here, please speak with your advisors, your professionals. This is educational, informational only. It is geared towards pharmacies. And we're going to go over the CARES Act, Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was the bill signed at the end of December, which really changed a whole lot of the pieces of the CARES Act. So it kind of threw a bunch of updates here in January that we're still trying to figure out, still waiting on guidance, and we'll get into some of that as well. But, you know, just like Bob was saying, I mean, I'm glad I caught the tail end of what he was saying. You know, we are seeing a dramatic evolution here in pharmacy, and with a COVID environment like this, and you guys on the front lines like you are, now's a great opportunity to really take it to another level. And frankly, if you're not taking it to another level, you're going to be left behind, and you're going to struggle. You have got to change here in this industry. And it's actually happening faster than it normally would, although it has been fast, changing pretty quickly here in past several years. But you know, what we're facing now is really putting the pedal to the metal for that change, and you've got to get on board here. And so I'm not going to preach, you know, redo what Bob said, but what he said was spot on. And I can tell you from the accounting side, we see those numbers in the pharmacies that are doing just that, and it's pretty impressive. So when you're running pharmacies that high powered, efficient, cash flow strong, margins are strong, payroll's under control, balance sheet strong, the accounting fundamentals are there, well, you're going to have some tax issues that are a result of that. And so, you know, tax planning first and foremost is very important, and even more so in a pandemic environment, because we are faced with the PPP, you know, all these different changes here. And I'm just going to go down the list and kind of tack off or touch on each one. And just kind of have a general discussion. You know, please throw in some questions or anything. I'm happy to answer any questions that are out there. But obviously, you know, when the pandemic started, the CARES Act was passed, I think March 27th, 2020. And the big thing in there was the Paycheck Protection Program. I think the NCPA had a survey out where 98% of pharmacies got a PPP loan, where you had 8 weeks to spend it. Then it evolved to 24 weeks. Now you can pick your own time period to spend that money, from the data funding up to 24 weeks. And at first, back in April or May, I should say, the IRS said, well, that Paycheck Protection Program is going to be taxable. So we are operating all year with the assumption that, hey, this is going to be a taxable loan, even though you don't have to pay it back, you're going to pay tax on it. And furthermore, the IRS came out and said, if you expect to get forgiveness, it's taxable in the year, in the 2020 tax year, even if you don't apply for forgiveness until this year. So, that made tax planning very difficult. That was going to put a lot of pharmacies in some tax problems. And with the Consolidated Appropriations Act, they fixed that. Congress fixed it, and they said, no, all of it's non-taxable. You do not have to pay it back. The expenses are deductible. The loan itself is non-taxable, and you get some tax attributes to that, such as basis if you're an S corporation, which is huge. If you're an S corporation, you want basis in your entity. It's kind of like a checkbook. Deposits go up. When you take money out, it goes down. Basis drives it up. So we want that basis in there. So that's a huge benefit we saw here with the Paycheck Protection Program and the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Furthermore, they did expand, they had a $50,000 and under loan amount was pretty much automatically forgiven. You don't have to meet the FTE reduction calculations and all that. You could just, if under 50 grand, you can just sign a piece of paper and you're good there. And then in the act, the Consolidated, I'm just going to call it the CAA, they also moved the one-page application, forgiveness application, up to $150,000. So you would really have to just sign that as well. You wouldn't have to submit all this information to your lender, the calculations, the documentation. Theoretically, you still have to make those calculations and know whether you have full forgiveness or not on that loan. And then anything over $150,000, you're still going to have to go through that full process for forgiveness. Now, I will say with pharmacies, pharmacies didn't really see, they didn't see the hit that other industries did. Most pharmacies actually saw increases in revenue. And so keeping people on payroll and meeting those requirements was really not an issue. So not too concerned about that. But we did see a lot of banks say, get your application in, get your application in, get your application in. I'm ready to get paid, because these banks got paid when the SBA gave that forgiveness. But now we're facing a problem here where it's conflicting with the employee retention credit. But before I get to the employee retention credit, I'll just say that, in the CAA, there was also the PPP second draw loan, which is you could get a second PPP loan if you've got a first and you used it all as you were supposed to. But you had to have a 25% reduction in revenue. A lot of pharmacies, actually, I don't think we had any, maybe one pharmacy, a niche pharmacy, was eligible there. So not expecting a lot of pharmacies to get that. I call it the second draw loan there. So not going to spend a lot of time on there. But then, when all these banks were saying, hey, get your application in, and you apply for forgiveness, you get your forgiveness, that's great and all. We always had the stance where you need to be patient with all this pandemic relief, with all the legislation. This is all uncharted territory. Everything you're pretty much seeing on here is all uncharted territory, which means there's no guidance, there's no precedent. It's operate at your own risk. And so be patient, wait for the guidance to come out. All these items you see on here, they all link together some way or another, whether we're doing the tax return, whether we're doing the accounting, the books, whether we're applying for other relief items, they all link together. You have got to be very careful and patient. The pharmacies that went ahead and applied for PPP forgiveness are we're waiting on information from the IRS, but the employee retention credit can conflict with that. And the employee retention credit, now this is this was a part of the CARES Act that passed back in March of 2020. At first, it was not eligible to pharmacies. It wasn't eligible if you got a PPP loan, and with the NCPA data, pretty much all pharmacies did. So if you had the PPP, you couldn't get the ERC credit. But in the CAA, they said you can retroactively now go back even if you got a PPP loan, and see if you are qualified for the employee retention credit. Now, the employee retention credit, you have to have a 25% drop in revenue quarter over quarter. So 2020 quarter over 2019 quarter. That's one eligibility metric. Most pharmacies didn't have that 25% reduction. If you did, there's no requirement that it was due to a pandemic. You could have moved locations and had a rough start getting set up and your revenue dropped 25%. You could be eligible for this credit. It is not, that 25% drop in revenue is not dependent on the pandemic. You don't have to prove that it was due to the pandemic. If you don't meet that test, which a lot of pharmacies do not, there's a second test that you could potentially qualify, and that is if your pharmacy was essentially had a partial shutdown due to a government order. And if you had that partial shutdown, the impact of your pharmacy was not nominal. There's no guidance on this at all. There's a FAQ at the IRS, which is not, the IRS makes it very clear on their website, these FAQs you cannot rely on, but that is the only information we have from the IRS on what a partial shutdown is that directly impacts a pharmacy that's not nominal. So what bottom line is what I'm getting at here is this credit is up to $5,000 per employee. So, you know, $10,000 of wages is the max per employee times 50%. The credit amount is $5,000. So if you had a partial shutdown in your pharmacy for, let's just say, a month, and you lost your gift shop sales, you lost $30,000, you say, well, that was not nominal. And you're required to shut down that gift area. You know, potentially you could argue and say, I'm eligible for this credit. And so you would take your a month worth of payroll for the period the order was in effect, and you would calculate that credit. And with the with the $10,000 max, and then the $5,000 credit amount max per employee, $10,000 wage max, and then times 50% is $5,000 per employee. And I can tell you that this credit is very substantial for a lot of pharmacies. We do not have a lot of pharmacies that qualify right off the bat right now, but I'm telling you, we're digging into this, and I'm waiting on more information on it. But where this conflicts with the Paycheck Protection Program is the IRS says you can't double dip. So you cannot use Paycheck Protection loan, which most got in April, May. You can't use those loan for forgiveness, the payroll costs for forgiveness, and claim those wages for the ERC credit. So if you get a $100,000 PPP loan and you spend it all on payroll from April to the end of May, let's just say, but through April through the end of May, you're also under a partial shutdown eligible for the ERC. You can't double dip those same wages for the PPP you use the PPP for and the ERC. And if you've already applied for forgiveness, you're kind of stuck here until the IRS tells us if you may even be eligible. If you haven't applied for forgiveness, you've got some flexibility here. You could do the ERC if you're eligible for this period, and then the PPP for the second period. And you could get both, but you just can't double dip on the same wages for each. So, bottom line is we're still getting a lot of developments here, and this employee retention credit is something you got to look at a little closely. We haven't pushed out any information on it. Actually, this is the first I've really spoken to any publicly about it. But be on the radar for this one. There might be some opportunities for some pharmacies, and it is a very substantial credit, generally speaking, if you can qualify. Now, economic injury disaster loans, grants, we saw those grants. A lot of pharmacies applied for those grants up to $10,000. You don't have to pay it back. You can deduct the expenses that you're using that money for. You're still getting the tax attributes I talked about. You don't have to pay it back. But it's not taxable. So those grants, most got about $10,000. That was the cap, non-taxable, don't have to pay it back. If you got less than $10,000, because the SBA kind of modified that program, I would say like in late April, May, part of the CAA is now that they're going to be emailing groups and hopefully get you whole to the $10,000, because I believe the law was $10,000. So if you got, say, $3,000, you may be getting an email from the SBA saying, hey, your other $7,000 is coming. Not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure that's on the horizon. The loans itself, we saw a lot of pharmacies get those. Oh, I wouldn't say a lot, but we saw pharmacies getting some of these economic injury disaster loans up to $150,000, 3 3/4 interest rate, very, very reasonable terms, pay it back over 30 years. There were requirements on how you use those funds, just like the PPP. But we saw pharmacies send that money back because of the terms and conditions that were associated with those loans. You could not take distribution or draws from the pharmacy while you had those loans on the books, unless you asked the SBA for permission. That doesn't sound very good to me. So a lot of pharmacies were sending those back. But nevertheless, they're still there, reasonable terms, something to consider. The Sba Loan Forbearance. Now, we saw this with a lot of pharmacies as well. Pharmacies that have been buying that have bought their pharmacy in the past using SBA financing, or maybe expanded, or whatever it may be. If you had that SBA financing on the books, the SBA, as you know, for those that did, they paid 6 months of your principal and interest. So they paid, if you had a $17,000 SBA loan payment every month for 6 months, they paid it. That also is non-taxable. You don't have to pay tax on it, and you get to deduct the interest. So, I mean, we're talking about cash flow here. These are pharmacies got a lot of cash flow last year with the PPP, the SBA loan forbearance for those, a $10,000 grant. Maybe some we're going to be able to go back and get the credit, because you can go back and amend payroll tax returns to get that credit if you're eligible. Again, there's a lot to weed out there. We're waiting on a lot of guidance, but keep your eye on that one. So there's a lot of cash coming into pharmacies, and just going off the last presentation with Bob, when you're evolving, when you're changing, when you're doing things different and leading the change in the pharmacy industry, it requires capital, and obviously cash is king in a pharmacy. So, we've seen a lot of pharmacies really be able to shift their balance sheets, strengthen their balance sheets, and tie that with, the value-based pharmacies out there. You're really seeing pharmacy get a good, strong base here to jump off forward into after this pandemic into. So, it's a really exciting time right now for pharmacy. But back here, the SBA loan forbearance here. So again, that's non-taxable. But they paid 6 months. The SBA did on your behalf. And right now, as part of the CAA, they expanded that. So I believe if they'll pay another 3 months beginning in February this month, but it's going to be capped at $9,000 this go round. So if you got a $10,000 loan payment that was originally part of the forbearance, you should get a $9,000 payment from the SBA for another 3 months. And if we're getting into the SBA loans, right now, I can tell you the pharmacy niche banks are gearing up right now, because you can essentially waive SBA fees if you're able to close some deals between February 1st and the end of I believe it's September. Waive those SBA fees, which can be quite substantial, and you get loan forbearance. I believe you get 6 months in those cases. So if you're looking to expand, looking to grow, speak to the pharmacy banks out there. Those guys can get you set up going right here with these benefits that are currently out there that we may never see again. I was talking to one the other day, and I believe they're going to save, between all those waiving the SBA fee, the loan payments, it ended up being $200,000 that they're not going to have to put onto the loan. And then we're thinking, you add interest onto that, that you're not going to be paying either. So expanding operations, growing your pharmacy, now's a good time to be looking at that if that's in your radar. HHS provider relief. Boy, this one was a mess at first. It still is. We saw pharmacies get payments in April here. Didn't have to pay that back. You had to attest to it, that you accept the terms and conditions. Wasn't a whole lot of money in many cases. And then they opened it up to additional draws or distributions, and they had about 3 of them, I believe. And so we saw pharmacies apply for more funding under the HHS. And then I believe it was August or September, several FAQs at the HHS come out and say, if you applied for these funds using prescription revenue, that does not count in determining your provider relief amount. So my advice here is, I'm not an attorney. You need to speak with a healthcare attorney on that to determine what you need to do, whether that's pay that back or what, because if you're using prescription revenue to get that money, and it says you can't use prescription revenue, you have to have revenue from patient care. And it's very clear in the HHS provider relief, which is a great website, by the way, if you just type that in Google, that prescription revenue does not count as patient care. DME does, those kinds of things do, but prescriptions do not. Speak with your healthcare attorney on that, because you may not be in compliance with the terms and conditions. And I can tell you that we got a lot of pharmacies got a lot of money there. And so that's the due diligent thing to do. And there's reporting requirements coming up for that, which, by the way, you have to report a whole lot of information on there, which is when they might do a true up of whether you were really eligible or not. Who knows? But there was a lot of confusion when this was all going on. Maybe they just will sweep it under the rug. Maybe they'll go back and try and get this reconciled. We'll have to see, but just speak with your attorneys if you got a whole lot of money on that. Qualified, and by the way, that HHS provider relief is taxable. So that is taxable money if you do not pay it back. Okay, qualified improvement property. This was part of the CARES Act. So they fixed this, and essentially this was fixed as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And, what I want to touch on here is, if you did a lot of USP 800 upgrades or anything in your pharmacy improvements, that is qualified improvements, which would be, mostly, USP 800 upgrades, not where you're expanding your building, but improving the building itself. You can now get that as 15-year property for tax purposes instead of 39-year depreciable property. And you can take, I believe, Section 179 on that. So what you can do here is you can essentially go back, make the corrections, write it all off under the bonus or 179 depreciation rules, and essentially get refunds for that writing off of all that property. You got to speak with your advisors on that, make sure that's the right thing to do. But if you had any big improvements in the 17 or 18 or 19, check on that. Make sure you maximize the opportunities are there, because you can get money in your pocket today by filing an amended return and getting that corrected. So something to put on your radar. They also expanded net operating losses. So if you had maybe a net operating loss in 2019, even 2020, you can carry that back 5 years. So you can take that loss, carry it back 5 years, and apply it to tax you already paid and get refunds. I know we did a few of those, in 2019. There'll probably be a few in 2020. And so these folks were able to get refunds, cash in the pocket. And we're talking a lot of cash here right away. I believe that expires in 2021 unless they update that in the new legislation that I hear is being discussed right now. So we're probably going to have even more changes. But if you had any NOLs, just something to think about. Accrual to cash accounting, we still, this is from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but I still talk about it because we still see pharmacies out there not taking advantage of it that are eligible. Essentially, if you have gross receipts, revenue under $26 billion, and you do have to assume controlled groups. So if you own 6 pharmacies, you have to total your revenue there. But if you're under the $26 million revenue mark or gross receipts average for the prior 3 years, you're eligible for the cash accounting for tax purposes. And when you go from accrual to cash, generally you're writing off all those receivables and creating a big expense, which lowers your taxable income. So this one expires at the end of 2025. Still going to be talking about this, but something to think about for those that have not taken advantage of that. Now, with that being said, you definitely want to keep your books on accrual. You do cash for tax purposes, but you keep your books on accrual basis so you can really see what's going on month in, month out with the receivables, payables, inventory. You got to have accrual-based accounting books, period, for pharmacy. No questions asked. Qualified business income deduction. Pharmacies are eligible for this qualified business income deduction, generally speaking, but I bring this up because we're still seeing a few pharmacies that didn't take advantage of this either. Matter of fact, I saw one the other day. It was $100,000 that they lost. They didn't, the count it missed, and so they're going to have to go back and amend returns to get this. But you should be taking advantage of this qualified business income deduction, which was part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That is a 20% deduction for your qualified business income. So if you have $100,000 of qualified business income, you get a deduction of $20,000. This is for the S corporations, the partnerships, the sole proprietors. And this was designed to get those pass-through entities closer to a C Corp tax rate, which is 21%. So definitely be looking at that if you haven't taken advantage of that. R&D tax credits is another thing, and this is something to really be looking at now, because with all the changes and the what pharmacies experiencing right now, getting into expanding a vaccination program, learning about a vaccination program with COVID, update your processes and procedures, anything you're doing research and development wise that meets a 4-part test. There's got to be uncertainty, technological in nature, so physical science, those kinds of things. It's got to be a new business product or process for the pharmacy. And there's got to be a process of experimentation. So you've evaluated alternatives and those kinds of things. And so if you meet that 4-part test for the activity you're doing, so you're maybe implementing a new vaccination program that you've never done before, or you're getting into sync, you're getting into a sync program, going off of what Bob was saying, and you're learning all about it, document all that, document what you're doing, document the 4-part test, document the time you're spending in there, and you may be eligible for a tax credit there. So, if you're going to put invest time into this stuff, hey, you might as well get a credit while you're at it. Just, you got to document it. Definitely be doing that for that one. Oh, let's see. I believe that's all I had. I ran through that. I know we had limited time here. I didn't want to hold anybody up, but I'm happy to take any questions or do whatever you guys would like from here on. You got me the rest of the day. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Safe and secure signature capture right on your customer's smartphone. No disinfectant necessary. SafeSign by RMS is about to change how your pharmacy captures signatures. Again soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Sorry that we've gone long today. Two great presentations, though. I hope you all enjoyed that. So I want to thank all of you for being here, for attending today, taking time out of your Saturday. Really do appreciate it. Coming up, coming up in March, we have Ernest Nesmith from Nesmith Rogers Financial Consulting. They'll be joining us to discuss investment strategies for 2021. It'll be a great follow-up, to the closeout of tax season. We'll then have a panel discussion on front-end inventory and successes and how to optimize the front end of your business. The video of today's recordings will be up early next week, and we really hope that you'll take some time, fill out the surveys you're going to receive later today, and give us some feedback of what you thought of our presentations today, what you think of Climb in general, and also what you think of doing this on a Saturday or a Sunday. Please share. We'd love to get this out to pharmacies all across the land, so please share this with your colleagues. I'd like to thank the team here at RMS, our consultants. They've been scrolling at the bottom here. It takes an entire team to put on a production like this. It's a live production, and hence the reason we've gone over. But we really do appreciate. I want to thank all of my team in helping make this happen. We hope that you've really enjoyed it today, and I look forward to getting your feedback. As I told you earlier, we're gonna change over here to After Climb, where I'm going to do a deep dive into how our product handles inventory management. Even if you're not a customer, if you'd like to stay on for that, you're welcome to do so. There are some great concepts in here that your system may do. Anyway, I've pre-recorded that. It's actually 29 minutes. And then I will come on afterwards to answer any questions that you have. So we'll have a quick transition. Thanks again. Really appreciate you being here on a Saturday. And I'll be back for questions and answers after we run this quick video, or this 29-minute video. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Welcome everyone to After Climb. So in the last session of After Climb, I talked about what I consider to be the most important report in our POS system, the return on investment report. And I talked at that point and said, even if you're not inventory control, you can get value out of the return on investment report. However, to get full value, you have to be on inventory control. So today in After Climb, I'm going to talk about inventory control. So let's get started. First, I want to do a quick review of a couple of the terms I talked about last time. So inventory turns, important. Calculation, turns equal the cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory cost. So that's the measure of time, a number of times you sell through your inventory during whatever period you're looking at, and we usually look at that over the course of a year. So an example, if your sales are $500,000 in your front-end merchandise and your cost of sales are $300,000, then your average your average inventory is $150,000, then your turns are the $300,000, the cost of your inventory, divided by the average inventory value, and that means you have 2 turns in this example. So important to understand that. The other piece, gross profit return on investment, GPROI, is the GPROI is the gross profit over the period of time divided by the average inventory cost during that same period of time. It measures the amount returned on every dollar invested in inventory,
And as an example, if your JIP ROI is 300%, it means that for every dollar you invested in inventory, your return is $3. So, and remember from last time, a good turn at the retail level is 4 to 6 turns. Good JIP ROI is somewhere in the 250 to 350% range. So now let's move on to a couple of other topics for today. So inventory control types. In our system, we have a couple. And I want to, before I get to those, I want to talk a little bit about this average inventory cost that's used in JIP ROI and turns. One of the things that our system does is on every single day, at the end of the day, our system records the inventory value of every single item in a table. So at the end of a period, let's say a year, you're looking at the gross profit return on investment, or the turns, and it's calculating that inventory, that average inventory cost for the entire year. It's summing for that whole 365 days. Every single day there's that inventory value for every single item. It sums for each item, it sums up the inventory value every single day and divides it by 365 to get you what your true average inventory cost was over that entire year for that item. And it does it for every item. And that's how we calculate all the way down to the individual item level what that average inventory cost is. Now that's important because the two types of inventory control, basic and advanced, give us more control, granular control over ensuring that those daily inventory values are accurate. So basic uses average costing to calculate the current value. That's one of its differences. And it allows inventories to go negative, the on-hand quantities at the item level to go negative. So at the end of the day, if that item has gone negative, the recorded value for that item is whatever that negative amount is. So if the item is selling, or the cost of the item is $3 and you got your -1, then it's going to show the inventory value for that day was -3. Now, if you're keeping up on your inventory and you're fixing those negatives on a regular basis, you're not allowing lots of negatives to happen, then over a course of 365 days, it may not have a huge impact. But it's not as granular, not as controlled as advanced inventory control. So advanced inventory control uses FIFO, first in, first out, to calculate the current value. That's one of its differences. It does not allow for negative on-hand quantities. When an item is going to go negative, it throws that into something called the holding tank, and I'm going to be showing you that. So thinking, just keep in mind that the reason between the two, or the one of them takes more, is a little bit more involved, but it gives you advanced, but it gives you tremendous accuracy, far the greatest accuracy you can have. Basic, there are tools available for both of these, and it's not quite as accurate. But for some people, it's plenty. So it's really up to you as you understand these concepts as to choose what's best for you. And you can do mix and match. So in part of your store, some of the sections or some of the items could be basic and others advanced. And as you understand how this works, you'll be able to make a determination as to how much sense that makes for you. Okay, so I'm gonna get started in a little bit here with how it's set up. But the inventory control setup is the same really for both advanced and basic. It starts in the fine line code. I'll show you that. And then it's set at the individual item level under the product manager, under the sales tab. You choose whether it's basic or advanced. And I'm going to show you how to set that up very briefly. And then I'm going to talk about the tools. For both basic and advanced, we have a data anomaly feature in Product Manager, which some of you are aware of, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then we have an Android application for counting, doing inventory counting. Today, I am not going to talk about inventory counting. I'm going to do that next time. I'm going to go through actually doing a count using the Android app and show you how count sets work and how perpetual inventory counting works and so forth. So that's going to be next time. For basic, today we're going to talk about two reports that are imperative that you run regularly: the low stock report to show you anything that's gone negative, and the data anomaly report to show you anything that's being sold at cost or below cost. For advanced, you don't have to use those reports, because those items, anytime an item is sold at below cost or at cost, or anytime that an item is going to go negative, it goes to the holding tank so that you can fix the item before it hits your reports. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to move over to the system here, the POS system, and I'm also going to turn off my video so that I maximize the screens that you can see. So I'm going to turn my video off. And we're going to start in the product manager. So I'm going to open the product manager. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you where you set these things, set this up. So I'm going to start just with an item here. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that tell you right off the bat, or one thing that tells you right off the bat whether or not you're negative, you're on basic or advanced. And the first thing right here, you can see that the details button is not, it's grayed out. That details button is only available if the item is set up on advanced inventory control. Okay, now you can also see this particular item is negative, which also would be an indication that it's on basic inventory control. Now, I mentioned in the slide that there's where you get this started. The first place you have to have set up is under the fine line. So if you look under the fine line, there's a field here for inventory control status, and your choices are advanced, basic, or none. So there may be items in your store that you would do none. As a good example of that would be greeting cards. It doesn't make sense to try to do inventory control of greeting cards. So those items in the greeting card section would be set to none. As I mentioned, you may choose to do certain sections of your store as basic and others as advanced. That's completely up to you. And as you get used to this, and you can change that as time goes on. You can start basic, and then as you get more refined, continue to change certain areas to advanced. This is done at the fine line level. I'm going to leave this as basic because I'm going to be showing you the difference between the two. So that's the first place that things have to be set up, at the fine line. As you add new items into a fine line, it will look at what the inventory control status is, and it will then put that item in with that inventory control status. So if you put in a new item under acetaminophen, then it would be set up as basic inventory control automatically. Okay, now let's go and look at where in the item level. So now we're in this item under sales parameters. Then you can see there's a field here, inventory control status, and that has to be set as well. So if you set this to, you could set this to none, and that would allow you to not have this item on inventory control if there was some reason you wanted to do that. If you set it to advanced, it would not work. They have to match. It has to be, it would have to be basic, or if you want it to be advanced, you'd have to have the fine line to be advanced. So this is already set to basic. Now, if you made a change, let's say that we went in the fine line, we set it all to advanced, and then we wanted to make all of the items in that fine line be advanced, we would use the tool in the product manager called block editing. And I'm going to show it simply because it's a neat tool. And we would come into block editor, and we would find the field that all the fields in virtually all the fields in the product manager here. I've already pre-selected the inventory control status. So you would double click it. I'll just show, I'll double click, it's no longer yes, double click it again, it says yes. So now that's the field you want to change. And then you want to load your items. And so you're going to query your database, and I'm going to say I want to just change that one fine line. So I come here and say I want to select the fine lines, but here's all the different criteria you could use to query the database. I'm doing it by fine line. I click next. It was this one fine line that I wanted to change, so I click next. It'll load all the items from that find line. I can review them, click select all, click next. And then it'll bring all those items into the grid on the right. It'll tell you 37 items. I click OK. And then on the Product Manager, it tells me I'm in block edit mode, and it put in green, it highlights the field that I want to change. So I would simply click this, change it to advanced, which I'm not going to do, but I would change it to advanced, and then I would click next. And when that happens, it would go through all 37 of those items and change them to advanced. And that would be the only thing you have to do. And then you'd be done. You'd click block and it'd be done. Okay, that's the block editor. Just an added bonus of how to make changes in the system. Okay, so that's getting everything set up. So now let's take a little bit deeper dive, and we're going to start with basic inventory control. So the item that I have here is on basic inventory control. And I'm going to look at two reports that are important so that you can see, correct things as soon as you can so that it doesn't impact reports moving forward. Remember, with basic inventory control, every single day it's looking at the average cost. So in this particular case with this item, there's a one on hand, but there's no cost associated with it. So it's going to show that the inventory is zero. There's one on hand, but it has no value. So that will skew your reports if that stays that way for a long period of time. So we have two reports to help us find problem children when you're using basic inventory control. So let's take a look at those two reports. So we're going to go over to product reports, and I'm going to hit product report. And the first one that I think is important is the data anomaly report. Now, this report can be used for lots of other reasons, but today we're going to look at it. Here are all the data anomalies. I'm going to come to here, and I'm going to look at really what I'm interested in today is anything that has would skew the margin, the growth, there's no cost associated with it. There's zero retail, so it's selling at 100%, at 100% margin, or the retail is lower than the cost, so it's selling below cost. I'm going to go ahead and deselect all these and just pick these three. You can look through these. These are things that you might look at a different time, but for the purposes of today, I'm interested in these three things. So we're going to click next. And I'm interested in my cost. I'm really interested in this average cost, okay, because that's what the system is tracking. And I'm going to, just for sake of making this a little faster, since I just use a small portion, just 2 departments worth of items that I sell. So just to help speed along reporting for the purposes of this, I'm going to click and just choose the 2 departments that I sell from in my demo system. And we're going to preview this. Okay, and what we found here is this list of all of these items, and you can see the way this works, lists you the items. It gives you a problem column, and then up here it tells you what the problems are. So C stands for zero average cost, and you can see also there's zero average cost. So you would print this report, you would go to these items, and you would update them and get a cost associated with the quantity on hand. So you can see that there's a quantity on each one of these on hand, and then there's no cost associated with it. So if you're, as the system is recording that average or that value on a daily basis, it's recording quantity in hand, but $0. And so that's going to skew your reports. So this, I should blow this up, sorry. This report is important to do that. So print this report, go into those items, and correct the item. So let's take a look at one of those items before I move on. So I'll go ahead and close the report out, but let's go back to the product manager for a moment, and I will bring up this item. Okay, here's the item I was talking about, zero. The average cost is $0. And since you see that it's in blue, this is a good time for me to talk about that something I mentioned, called the Data Anomaly. So normally when you open Product Manager, you'd see the blue flip charts at the bottom. You notice the arrow, which means you can have 11 or F12 to go to the next screen. And there's a screen here called Data Anomaly. So when you click that, it lets you choose what is going to cause something to show up on the screen. So in this case, I've got all of these different things, the 3 that I ran the report for, and then some others. If it's got no vendor attached, if it doesn't have a preferred vendor, if it has multiple preferred vendors, things like that, that can be important in keeping my database clean. Now, if you're using target margins, you also could put target margins here, and you could put in a variance. So yeah, you say if it's under my target margin, but it's within 5%, then don't tell me about it. Okay, but anyway, back to what we're most concerned about today, which is these 3. So once you've set this up, what the system does is it highlights any fields that have a problem. And up here, it tells you what the problem is. So in this case, what C stands for zero cost. Okay, so now all we do in this case is we come in and tell it what the cost is. So if in this case, let's see, we could go back and you could look up the invoice and see, what the last time it was. But this cost over here, the regular cost, is what you're currently purchasing this item for. So for sake of discussion, it's just as easy. We're going to put that in here. The system is then, when we click Save, the system is going to ask for a reason. You can set up reason codes. I just have inventory update. That's what I'm going to use. Okay, so now that the highlighting goes away, and now you fix this. So moving forward, like tonight, when this average value of inventory is tracked, it's going to have an accurate number. Okay, so that's the first report. The second report we want to look at is the low stock report. So let's go back over to reports, product reports, and run the low stock report. Now with the low stock report, we can tell it that we want to know on hands that are equal to or lower than. We'll go lower than equal to or lower than -1. I'm going to tell it to skip inactive items because that'll help speed the report. And then also, I'm just going to pick the departments again that I sell from, so it doesn't look at other items. And so I'm going to pick these 2 departments. Okay, and I only have one item that's on basic inventory control. That is below the, whoops, make that a little bit smaller. There you go. So I have this Tylenol. So I would need to go in to this Tylenol and fix the on hand. So how frequently should you be running these 2 reports? Well, it would be nice to run them daily and fix this stuff daily. Realistically, once a week. I think you will have to see how many items are consistently showing up on the report. If you just have if you're waiting a week and you have hundreds of items, then you have a serious problem with your inventory count, and then you need to evaluate redoing your count. But if you only have over the course of a week a handful of items, then you really probably aren't causing too much problem with your reporting. So it's really going to depend on how much of a problem you see in your pharmacy when you're running these reports. Okay, so those are the 2 tools that will help you keep your costs correct and your inventory correct. Now, if you move on to advanced inventory control, so let's go back to the product manager for a moment. I'm going to bring up an item that is on advanced inventory control. And you'll see with this item that when we look down here, it tells you this item is in the holding tank. So the holding tank in advanced inventory control is where items go when they've been sold at the till, and there's a problem either with the quantity or the cost. So let's go look at the holding tank. The holding tank's under inventory control. We click on the holding tank, and we'll see that we have 2 items in the holding tank. So at the upper portion of the screen are the items that are in the holding tank. And then when you look all the way across, it tells you what the problem is. So this first item, the Maalox Wildberry, is in there for insufficient stock. And there's 2 instances of this item. Okay, what does that mean? Well, down here are the instances. And this is the actual transaction that occurred at the till. So at this time and this time, these 2 transaction numbers, this was the quantity that was sold and the amount it was sold for. So 2 people came in and bought in different transactions, but there wasn't sufficient stock in the system during that time period. Okay, so when we look at this, we can see the we need to fix this inventory. The second one down is a zero cost sale. So what this allows us to do is fix these items in the product manager before the sale actually gets booked into the it books in the back end. I mean, you see it when you're running your daily reports, but it doesn't hit the product reports until it's corrected here. So even if you do it a couple days later, it's fixed in the system so that when you run your product reports, they're very accurate. Okay, so how do we do this? So the very first thing we can do is go, okay, here we have a total of this item with 2 items that it's trying to sell that doesn't have sufficient stock for. So we can click right down here to the product manager. By the way, before I go to that, if you had, let's say you had 20 or 30 or 40 items that were showing up for some reason, you can also click this count sheet. And then it'll have all of the items, and notice it has a barcode. So you can actually walk out there onto the shelf. For those of you that are using bin locations, which I'll talk a lot more about next time as part of the inventory counting piece, it'll put them in bin location order and tell you where that is. So you can walk out there, mark down what you actually physically counted, and then when you come back to update, you can just scan the barcode in Product Manager and then update the quantity. So that's step 1. Okay, so now let's just click on going to Product Manager. So we know that we have 2 that we tried to sell. And so now we go here to details and we want to add inventory. It's going to ask why. I'm just going to, you can put whatever reason codes you want. I'm just going to put inventory. And now it tells us the quantity. So here's how this works, an important piece. So you go out there and you say, okay, I have 2 on the shelf currently. And you tried to sell 2. Okay, so the holding tank has 2 of that item in it, and you have 2 on the shelf. That means for the sake of this, you have to put 4 into inventory. Okay, so whatever the total quantity was sold that's sitting in the holding tank, plus the quantity that you just counted that's actually on the shelf, you add those 2 together, and that's what you put into the holding tank. So we put in 4, and the cost on this item was $3.95. I looked at that before I clicked on this button. You could also go and look it up, from your wholesaler if you needed to, want to look on the last invoice or something like that. You could do that, but typically I recommend to people that you just use what your current cost is. That saves you time. So we'll click Add and OK here. Notice it cleared the holding tank and immediately went to 2. So all of that actually happens in the background, and it is automated, and if we go back to the holding tank, you'll see that item's now gone from the holding tank. So now the next item, we would do the same thing. We would then, this one though, is a 0 cost sale. So here, it's telling us to try to sell 1 and there's no cost. So now we can go to the product manager for this one, brings that up. And notice it shows that there's 3 on hand at 0. Okay, so what we can do here is we can come to the details, and in this case we've got a bucket of 3 that doesn't have a cost associated with it. So we just come and put the cost in, and I'm going to pick the cost, the last cost here, the current cost of 612. So 612, and click OK. It'll ask for the reason again. Click OK. And now this item has updated, the cost is updated. And now in this particular case, with costs, it doesn't automatically clear. So we'll go back to the holding tank and we'll tell it to retry. And you'll see it, items tried 1, items processed 1. And now the holding tank's clear. So how often should you be doing the holding tank? Well, again, just like with basic inventory, I would say start with daily. That may not be realistic, so then start with weekly. But if your holding tank has hundreds of items in it after weekly, you may need to, again, consider doing a significant recount. Again, it's just going to be completely dependent on your site and and how many of these items are in there, because it's it's about good data versus bad data. If you have garbage data in your system, there's going to be a lot more work. And so sometimes it just makes sense to we can clear the holding tank and then do a complete recount of the store or the sections that are on advanced inventory control. Again, that's just really dependent on your individual situation. Okay, so that really covers the tools and the difference between the two. I personally think that the advanced inventory control is the way to go. I love the holding tank because it catches those problems and lets you correct them before it does any damage to your reporting. So when it comes time to run your gross profit, return on investment, and your inventory turn reports, you absolutely get as good of information as possible. I'll open it up to questions. Thank you all for listening. And, if you're watching this, a recording of this and you end up with questions, just send them on to our support team and we'll get some assistance to you. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.